touching the lives of local people every day.
Hello and welcome to Business Extra. You join us at the Norfolk Cyber Security Conference here at the Space in Norwich. Now, behind these closed doors, businesses from all across Norfolk are finding out how they can better protect themselves and their customers from cyber threats. Obviously, at the end of last week, we had the big NHS ransomware hack, which took up so many headlines and caused so many problems. So all of this could not be more topical. We'll be finding out plenty more about what's been going on here today after this week's business headlines.
Thanks, Neil. Building Society Norwich and Peterborough has announced dates for the closure of its Norfolk branches. The names will have disappeared from our high streets by December. The owners have confirmed that 13 are closing. Starting from October the 20th, the closures will see 136 job losses across the region. Fresh calls have been made for the incoming government to focus on Norfolk's infrastructure needs to unlock the county's economic potential. Improved road and rail links, in particular, further dualling of the A47, the Great Yarmouth Third River Crossing and upgrades on the Norwich to London railway line have been highlighted as one of Norfolk's Chamber's key requests of ministers after the election. Next tonight, good news for Norfolk small businesses. They can now apply for larger grants to cut costs or launch new products. The new Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership has raised the amount for funding through its small grant scheme from £10,000 to £25,000. It's also being extended to allow businesses in the tourism and accommodation sector to apply. And a blast from the past for a local business ahead of the summer season on the Broads. Spark of Light, an original wooden motor cruiser built by Herbert Woods in 1927, has undergone an extensive restoration over the winter and is now available for hire to the general public. Around £50,000 has been spent on it, while also trying to preserve its original interior.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome back to the Norfolk Cyber Security Conference here at the Space in Norwich. They're doing the live Q&A session at the moment, asking the experts at the front their opinion on certain matters. But one of the big talking points today has been about the big NHS cyber security attack at the end of last week.
Yes, if people haven't sat up and taken notice of last week's events, then I think they must live in a different world entirely. And it doesn't matter what size of business you are. People might say, oh, that was the NHS and that's a big organisation. Well, of course people are going to hack that and attack that. But that's not the case. It was organisations right across the world of all sorts of shapes and sizes that were attacked.
Ransomware, unfortunately, is not a new thing. It's been increasing by at least double itself, 100% over the last couple of years. And it is very much an easy thing to promulgate as well, and especially after last Friday and the dramatic impact in which it had. That's the only issue, is that actually we're now thinking how would this apply to our own businesses, our own organisations, and how to protect ourselves going forwards.
Really pleased with the response today. It just shows how important cybersecurity is to all the businesses within the Norfolk region.
It's shown that there are vulnerabilities around us all the time, that people still have old infrastructure. They say, oh, that PC's been ticking away for years, it doesn't do anything, it's just in the corner. But unfortunately, that PC might be vulnerable, and then that's going to spread to the rest of your network. If it's got internet access and it's out of date, then really it's time to move on.
This conference was arranged long before last week's high-profile hack, but there was a full house to get guidance on where businesses could be putting themselves at risk. Different experts giving advice on everything from good practice to network security and common vulnerabilities that businesses face.
The problem is with ransomware is that of course it encrypts your machine, and there is something you can do, and it's very, very simple, is that actually making sure to make regular backups. Because obviously with ransomware, if you've clicked that link, yes, you rely on the person at the first instance having staff education and awareness to not click on that link. But if it does happen, then making sure your business organisation, your computer at home have regular backups. Because on modern ransomware, that is one of the only ways in which you can circumvent it.
One thing that the attackers have got loads and loads and loads of is time to do their research, time to look at. So when are you out of your house? then I'll go and attack it when you're not there. Now, we know that happens, so why do we think it doesn't happen in the cyber world when the information is so much more freely available?
I think there's a lot of businesses, and particularly small businesses out there, which are much more vulnerable, particularly things like giving out their network access key for visitors. It's really not good practice at all.
You've got to be very proactive. The problem is that people think that you just put a firewall in and forget about it, and unfortunately that's not the case. Attackers will find a way through your firewall. They know all the types of firewall, and I'm picking on one example only. There is 1,001 different examples, but they will find a way through those firewalls. They know how they're configured when they come out of the factory. They know what the passwords are for the admin rights. They will try those first. So if you just plugged it in and forgotten about it, they will get their way through it. And you might think you're nice and secure with firewalls, but you're actually not.
What are some of the worst mistakes and problems that people see in their work? Everything from ageing computers, Wi-Fi networks that simply anyone could log into, or maybe not just taking the threat seriously enough.
I think one of the most common ones, particularly from a wireless networking point of view, and I came across one again only last weekend. I happened to be in a golf club up in Lincolnshire, and I noticed their wireless was an open wireless access. I was fully expecting to get a portal page for me to log in and register. It never happened. I was straight onto the internet, completely open. I could see hundreds of other devices from around the golf club, and they were all visible to me, making sure, or really, if I can see them, they can see me. It's an open network and it's to be avoided.
I went to a large organisation, we did an assessment with them, and we said, okay, so how often do you check the vulnerabilities on your system? And they said, oh yeah, we do it all the time. And I said, okay, fine. And I was talking to the outsourcing partner, and I said, so how often do you provide a report on those vulnerabilities into your client? And they said, oh, we do it every quarter. That's just not good enough. That needs to be done probably daily, and probably if it's a big organisation, and this was, it probably needs to be done hourly.
The individuals don't really see it as a tangible threat. What I spoke about earlier today was actually in relation to, people don't associate the value and perceive the right level of risk, the information and data in which you hold. We were really good at keeping our cars safe, we're really good at keeping our houses safe and our physical assets, because we're hard programmed to understand and perceive risk because of that impact if we'd lost it or we lost money or something along those lines. But what people don't associate is actually information and data is money and profit and your business, and you rely on it in every possible conceivable way.
And if all those challenges aren't enough, there's a new law on the horizon that makes cybersecurity even more important. Kitty from Burkitt is an expert in it and was explaining how not taking your tech security seriously could leave you with a huge fine.
In May 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation comes into effect, and that will completely replace our current data protection law. And it brings about huge amounts of changes. There are things that will be familiar, but there are also a lot of changes, and companies do need to start being quite proactive to make sure that they're really taking the compliance steps that they need to take to be ready for 2018. The big headline risk, the one that's been grabbing all of the news stories, is the fines that can be imposed. So if there is a breach under the new law, the regulator can now impose fines up to a maximum of a huge €20 million or 4% of global group turnover, if that's a higher figure. I've been advising companies on data protection compliance for about 7 years, and the first 5 or 6 of those years were fairly depressing at times. You mentioned the word data protection and people start looking for the nearest exit. And in the last year, we've seen a real sea change in terms of people engaging with it. And that's been a very positive experience from my perspective.
So there may well be some progress, with more businesses waking up to the threat. But there's no quick fix, and it's a fight that goes on every minute of every day.
There's 250,000 pieces of malware generated every day. There's 30,000 different infected websites per day. And if you imagine that sea level that's rising, and businesses and organisations like Microsoft and Apple and antivirus organisations, they're building sea defences that are combating a sea level that rises that fast.
So that's all we've got time for from the Norfolk Cyber Security Conference. The headline for me from today is that it's a part of your business you can't afford to ignore. As ever, you can get in touch on Twitter. We are @MustardTV. The hashtag is Business Extra, and we're back at the same time next week. But until then, have a very good night.
Norse, touching the lives of local people every day.